guys, welcome to Life of P&K. I wanted to make this video, I've been thinking about it actually for a while, and I wanted to make this video about the history of the cars that I've owned. Obviously this channel, 80% of the channel is focused on cars, 20% is focused on basically travel. Not much budgeting going on lately, but I'm gonna have to make some videos about that at some point as well. But I wanted to make a video that will show you the progression of cars that I've owned in my life, what I've done to them. So this video is going to be a lot of me talking, nothing much. I'll post a couple pictures, a couple videos of the cars that I've owned, but it's going to be mostly me talking. So if you guys are not interested in that, now is the time to click off. If you guys are interested in that, there'll be some interesting stories in there, especially with the first official car that I owned. My dad and I did a lot of work on it. Not when it comes to making it faster, just keeping it on the road. So we did a lot of work together. It was very nice bonding experience. So without further ado, let's get into this video. And before I go to the first car I ever bought with my own money that I own, I wanna do two honorable mentions of cars. The first one was 1992 Ford Tempo. That is the car that I actually learned to drive. I learned a lot about cars, I would say, and what I mean by a lot about is like that you can like tweak with them, do certain stuff. For that car, I don't know, online I was looking at pictures and stuff like that back then, and I was able to pop all the vents and everything on the dash and paint it white. It actually didn't look too bad, but the bad part is later it became black because, you know, white gets dirty. And also the second honorable mention will be 1994, I believe, Toyota Camry wagon. So that was the car I passed my driver's test with. So I had to parallel park this big, massive Toyota Camry wagon. The actual tester or the police officer, they were very impressed by the parallel parking. So I was very proud of that. They were not impressed about me stopping fully at stop signs, but they let me pass, so it was fine. But those are the two honorable mentions that I wanted to mention to you guys. And so you guys might wonder, what is my first car that I ever purchased with my own money? That was a 1999 Firebird, Pontiac Firebird. They don't make them anymore. And at that point, I thought I was purchasing a phenomenal car. To me, I was this new kid, been in the States for about 5 years, I believe, when my parents immigrated. I was about 11 or 12. So I was 16, 17 buying this car, so it was about 5 years. And the car looked beautiful. I loved it. I will try to find pictures. If I did, I'll post them here. But to me, that car was beautiful. One thing I regret with that car is that I bought the V6 version, so the basic Toyota Firebird, not a Formula, not a Trans Am, nothing like that. I bought the basic V6 and not the LS1 V8. I found out and regretted that much later. But at first when I bought the car, I was like, it's phenomenal. It had a catback exhaust, so it sounded actually pretty good for a V6. The paint looked really good, very clean, the interior was nice. The car was not very old. That was, I believe, what year would that be? So it was 1999. It was about 2004 when I bought that car, so I was very happy. But I bought it for about 8,500 bucks. At that point, for me, that was a lot because I was just a kid working with a high school job. But with that car, so the story of this car is gonna be a little bit longer. I'm sorry in advance, guys. But with that car, I did a lot of things, and I don't mean a lot of things making it faster, a lot of things maintaining it. So down the years, obviously the car started getting older. When it started hitting close to about 90,000 miles, things started happening. The interior started cracking. That's a known fact. By the door, a little bit in the middle of the interior started cracking. And also what happened is I actually spun a bearing in the car. I don't know if the car was starved of oil, not sure what happened. I was on the highway, I was actually punching it, so I was accelerating. And I spun a bearing. So my dad and I did a lot of backyard mechanic. So at that point we lived in an apartment. So we had no garage, no tools, nothing like that. But my dad is very handy. He's super handy. He used to have, back in the day, he used to have an old Volga. Back in communist time, I guess in Bulgaria. He used to have an old Volga, or Ukraine, I guess at that point. He used to have an old Volga. He used to do a lot of different work. So when the whole carnage happened, we looked at the crankshaft. The crankshaft was okay, there were no grooves on it, nothing like that. It was very smooth because when I heard something going on wrong with the engine, I turned the car off completely and just cruised out to a parking spot. But when we opened up the bottom end of the engine, when we dropped everything, and mind you, this was November, December, so in the middle of the winter in St. Louis, it was really cold. We were working outside in the cold, we were freezing. But when we dropped the bottom end, we looked at the crankshaft. There was nothing really wrong with it. So we figured out that maybe the bearings spun and the bearings were like, took out some of the material. So we went to replace the bearings. Obviously, there was material taken off somewhere because the replacement bearings, we did it. And within 20 minutes of the car working normally, it started doing the same thing again, making the noise. So then my dad, because he's done that in the past with his Volga, he decided to use beer can, like the aluminum from a beer can, to put it as a filler of where the space is for the bearings on the crankshaft. We measured everything, we measured the space, we measured everything accordingly, and that actually worked. And it worked for about 2,000 miles. I was running bearings, new bearings, with a beer can aluminum between them and the crankshaft. It was phenomenal. So it worked for a little bit, but then eventually it spun again. So at that point, we decided to just buy a new engine from a different car. I believe it came from like the Grand Prix, the V6 ones. So we got that engine, the car worked fine. For this first car, the story became like super long. So the car worked fine. And then farther down the line, my exhaust started falling off because of the salt in St. Louis during the winter. Stuff starts rusting, the exhaust fell off. And just the car became not so nice anymore. It was hit one night when it was parked in front of our apartment. Don't know who did it. But yeah, at this point the car was pretty much terrible condition. Again, it was my first car. So at that point I started looking around. I was like, oh, I want to get something with a turbo, something with all-wheel drive because of the snow. I was looking at the Volvo S60Rs, but they were above my price reach. They were really cool cars. I really liked the way they looked. They were also manual and they were quick. So with that being, looking around, going to different Volvo dealerships, I went to one dealership and the guy said, hey, I don't have a Volvo S60R, but I have a Volvo S40 T5. I was like, okay, so what's the, what does this car really have? Because I wasn't very familiar. So the car had a 5-cylinder engine, which is pretty phenomenal. It had a turbo, it was a manual, and it had all-wheel drive. So it had everything I was looking for, just not as much power. I believe it was rated at 250 horsepower, something like that, or maybe less. It fit the bill, and it was about $15,000, I think $14,500. So I went home, I thought about it, and then I ended up buying the car. And I would say to this point, that is the car that got me into modifying cars, trying to make them a little bit faster. I did a little bit of work to the car. I got different wheels, better wheels obviously, different intercooler, I tuned it, an intake, which the 5-cylinder engines have a really cool intake that goes to the front with like a big pipe to the back. To me it looked really cool. It was mostly aesthetic than performance. So I did a lot of that work. I did some maintenance work. I changed some of the looks of the car. I used plastic for the first time on the badges, which was kind of cool. It made from silver to black badges. I liked it. I liked the car. I did a muffler delete, which made the car sound really good actually. Those 5-cylinder engines sounded phenomenal. Anyway, I would say it's probably one of my top favorite cars that I've owned so far. And then at some point, I believe it was almost 4 years later, the new Mark 7 GTI was coming out. So that was about, what, 2015, I believe, 2014. It was coming out, and I was like, and at the point I was working at a decent job. I was living with my parents. I really didn't have many bills to cover. So I was able to afford a brand new car the first time in my life. Around those years when the Mark 7 GTI was coming out, I saw the commercials of it and I was like, I really like the car. I went to the local VW dealership to look at one and maybe get one. So they didn't have exactly what I wanted. I initially wanted a white one with an automatic transmission. With the performance package. It came with the bigger brakes, the limited slip differential front, and maybe a little bit extra horsepower with the tuning. But they had one that was black manual in the dealership. So we ended up making a deal, which was great. I was happy with it. But then I quickly learned that the manual couldn't hold as much power after you tune the car. And also the black, actually, after a couple of washes, you could also see, even though I tried my best to keep it clean, I wasn't perfect, but you could, like any little mark or scratch, you would start seeing it on the black paint. So then after that, I got an error on the dash on the car, and I took it to the dealership and they're like, oh yeah, because you have the bigger performance brakes, there's the sensor that controls those brakes, and it's gone bad. So I was like, okay, so can you guys fix it? And they're like, unfortunately, part shortage is going to take 3 months. So I wasn't very happy about it because I couldn't really drive the car for 3 months because it was a safety concern because of the sensor and they couldn't replace it. So they gave me a loaner. In the meantime, I wrote to VW in North America. I wrote them a nice letter saying, hey, I purchased this car. I only had it for not even 2 months. I'm still making payments on it. I can't drive it for 3 months. It's a new car. It had like, I believe, I don't know, under 1,000 miles, maybe 800 miles, 700 miles. So I wrote a nice letter to them and they're like, yeah, no problem. Because my idea was like, they probably have other cars somewhere else. They can allocate one to the dealership, give it to me, and then get rid of this car whenever they can. So they agreed actually. They sent the tech down. The tech looked at the car. They said, yeah, let's go ahead and replace the car because of the part shortage is going to be 3 months. And by this time also 2 weeks have passed by. So with that happening, they're like, okay, we're gonna make you a new car, like a brand new build. And at the point, I just decided to go for it. And I was like, hey, this is what I wanted. I wanted a white car with an automatic DSG transmission. Is it possible, even I will pay more, is it possible to get that car built and sent instead of, you know, just building the same car, the black with the manual? And I said, yeah, sure, no problem. You don't have to pay anything. It will also cover your 3 months that, or whatever months you have. No. So we also cover the 3 months that you're waiting for the black car because the white car won't be ready for much longer time. So what happened then is the 3 months passed, the black car was fixed. I drove it for a little bit longer, which was nice. And then at some point the white GTI came in the dealership. I exchanged the cars, no problem. I didn't have to pay anything extra. So I would say for VW, they did phenomenal. The best customer service I've experienced so far, up to date, was with that car and that dealership. Amazing. I can't say more words to express. VW, the dealership in St. Louis, phenomenal. So I got into modding the GTI because it's a great platform. So I went with a tune, then I went with I went with a piggyback, the JB4, then I went with a Cobb tune, then I went with a custom Cobb tune. I had to do a transmission tune because it started slipping. So for guys, if you're slipping on a stock tune, APR, I believe it was stage 2, transmission tune, phenomenal. It fixed all my problems and it was able to maintain even more power when I put the IS38 turbo in the car. So I went ballistic with the car. Wheels, I lowered it, sway bars, everything you could think of when it comes to bolt-ons. And eventually I got to a point where I was maxing the IS20 turbo. So I went to go with an IS38 turbo from a Golf R. It was actually brand new turbo. It comes to find out, I got very lucky. There is a YouTuber called Samcrack. I went to eBay, I bought this part, and I was looking, because there's certain parts or part numbers that were not that favorable for the turbo. Apparently there were issues with it, so they kept upgrading it. So I bought this turbo, I get it, and this part number is completely off. I can't find this part number. Apparently, according to the eBay seller, Samcrack, it was the newest part number turbo, but I could not verify that anywhere. So I went back and forth. He was actually a very nice person. I was frustrated, but he was very calm. He was able to, you know, explain to me. He has a connection up in Mexico. That's where they were building the GTIs, where they can verify where this part is from. So he actually did that, and he's phenomenal, phenomenal person. He actually did that. So what happened is this turbo is only good, I believe, in South America and South Africa. The reason why is because something to do with the heat. I'm not sure. They used different parts inside the turbo, which made it even more robust. I did a lot of research for this. So at that point, I was happy. I put in the turbo. I learned a lot actually replacing the turbo. I was able to find a couple of things that you can do a lot quicker than removing like the oil line from the engine block. To me, that wasn't very good. You can just flip the turbo over and remove the oil line from the bottom. There's enough space. You just have to unhook it from the engine. With that, I learned a lot. The car to me, it was set up phenomenal. Here's a video. I was racing in St. Louis. So there's a big thing about St. Louis where people with trucks, they like to modify them, do a lot of things, you know, Midwest, farmers, whatever you want to call them. Well, there's this guy on Facebook that was calling me out, saying blah, 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 your GTI is slow. So here's a video for you guys to enjoy. on both those trucks pretty badly. The first race was I was not in the right gear, so it took me a while to catch up and get past. But after that, every single race was in the right gear. So it was funny. I raced a couple other cars. Typically, the Camaro SSS would not be able to keep up. The car was trapping about 120 in a quarter mile, so that was pretty good actually already. I did lose to my friend's CTS-V that had a bunch of modifications. Then it was trapping about 128, I believe, at the time. It just left me standing still. It was a really cool race. So this car eventually, I didn't get bored with it. I love the car, but for some reason in my mind, I always wanted a Mustang. Ever since the Cobra SVT hit the market, I've always wanted a Mustang. Obviously, that was the main competitor to the LS1 Firebird, the Trans Am. So I always wanted a Cobra V8 Mustang. I always wanted that. So I was looking at a I believe it was 2018. I was looking at a 2018 Mustang. I found a dealership. It was about an hour drive. I put everything back to stock on the GTI. That took me about a full day, a weekend. I left the turbo though. So whoever bought the GTI was blessed with a really good turbo and an intercooler, I believe. Yeah, I love the intercooler too. So I went to the dealership. I liked the Mustang. It was the 10-speed, which at that point it was new, but it was the quickest Mustang from the factory. The 10-speed, it was wide. I liked it. It was a beautiful Mustang. But one thing I really like is this. This is coming off probably right now, actually. I wanted to modify it, I just didn't have the money to do so. I was moving down to Florida at the same time, but I did some work. I bought some new wheels. I did like the chassis braces on the bottom. I did some work to it. I did a tune. I believe I used Lund. So I did like an E85 tune or like a blend, so I could run a blend as well. But the tune didn't really make a difference. I did an intake. I did a couple things to it. And at that point, I was thinking I want to modify it more. But also something was lacking. I don't want to say the soul of the Mustang was lacking. I have also a full catback. Sounded phenomenal. It just, to me, an automatic Mustang does not feel like a Mustang, like a proper V8. With a manual, it sounds different. It sounds better to me, I think. It's just the soul of the Mustang is gone when it goes to automatic. So I was looking around at a Kona Blue base model, because with the trade-in I lost value, so I didn't want to pay that much money extra or even break even. Base model, they were actually agreeing to transfer auto modifications themselves, but we couldn't agree on a deal because they want $8,000 more, when the Kona Blue, in my opinion, should be equal about what my Mustang was, because it wasn't even a premium. My Mustang was a premium. So we didn't make a deal. So then I ended up going to Tampa to check out another Kona Blue. At that point, I saw the Bullet. I've always wanted a Bullet. Even before I bought the white Mustang, I've always wanted a Bullet. I just couldn't afford it at that point in time. In Florida, things were going well. The new job was going very well. So I was like, let's do it. I ended up paying, I believe, $48 for the Bullet at that point. And the Mustang traded for about $30. So I was $19,000 in the hole, let's say. But it was a Mustang. It was a Bullet Mustang. Beautiful color, beautiful paint. Interior was beautiful. The manual, phenomenal. Even though everyone rags on those manuals, I never had a problem with it. The engine sounded really good. It sounds better than the GT because they have some of a different tuning, different intake. I believe the GT 350 intake. So the engine sounded phenomenal. So then I really took care of the car. I put, and you guys might laugh, I put about $3,000 of ceramic coating on the car, but that helped so much. I kept the car super clean, no scratches for a couple years, until I decided to move down to Miami, where the car was basically destroyed. Here people were just wild. So that car, I didn't do much. I didn't even tune it. I used the gauge and stuff like that, but I never put the tune in there. I used the N gauge in the middle. But I did a couple different aesthetic modifications. I changed the shifter, made like a custom shifter that says Bullet on the top. It was actually pretty cool. So not much with that car. I drove it for about 2 years moving down here to Miami, but just driving it daily and not having a garage. Yes, I have an apartment. It has a community garage, but it's not really your own garage. The car got damaged. There were many door dings. One of them actually scraped about this long and this thick part of the side, like right on the groove where the door is on the Mustang. I was super pissed. Just people just driving is insane here. And it hurt me that this car is being damaged while I'm not enjoying it much, because it was still kind of like during COVID, where I was working like hybrid schedule, not many days going in the office. But also it wasn't very practical when it comes to daily living. There was the space, yes, in the trunk. Once you put the seats down, you can put a lot of stuff, but not too much. And also just driving around with it, it's a heavy car. I miss the nimbleness of the GTI, or the turbo kick of the GTI. Yes, I could have modified the car, but again, I didn't have money to put a supercharger or a turbo in the car at that point, or anywhere to do it myself, because I didn't want to pay someone to do it, because you never know what kind of job they do. I'm not the bestest mechanic, but actually I follow directions very well, and I do everything to perfection. I just want to make sure it's perfect. And you know, other people, when they work on your car, they don't do the greatest job. So at that point, I was trying to start looking around. What other car can I replace this car with? And also, I was lucky that the market of the used car market was going up. So I was like, this is the perfect time. So around, at the beginning of 2022, I decided, well, I didn't decide, but every time I would see the new X3, I would just drool over it. I just love something about the crossover SUV, the sporty look. I wanted something more practical that has a sporty look. And also the M40i had the B58 engine, which has been a phenomenal engine, especially in the Supras. Great performance. And also the ZF transmission. I forgot what version it was exactly. The ZF transmission, it's almost as good as a DSG, even though it's an automatic. And I was like, this car has the best of both worlds. Because I was looking at the Tiguan, but the Tiguan, we didn't get the Type R models, or whatever you want to call them, the Tiguan R. We didn't get them here, so we got the crappy, I believe it's a 1.8 four-cylinder engine. So at that point I was like, the M40i, the X3 M40i, this is it. It looks perfect in the interior. It still retains some of those buttons, where I was looking at actually the Golf as well, the new Golf Rs, but everything inside was like one of those like touch buttons, and I didn't like that. So I was going with the X3. So I went to one dealership. They were terrible. They wanted to charge you $10,000 over MSRP for that car they had in their lot. I was like, no, that's not a deal. But luckily I found another dealership in Pembroke Pines, which their service is terrible, but their sales department is phenomenal. No MSRP. I just built the car. I didn't even have to go inside to build the car. I just talked to the guy put in the order. I went to pick it up. That's how quickly it happened. The lucky part is the Mustang, they gave me $43,000 back. So for 2 years having the Mustang, the Bullet, I went from 48 to 43. I lost $5,000, and this was a really good point in buying the BMW, the X3. I ended up paying a loan of about, again, like $17,000 to $20,000. I forgot exactly what it was, but a lot around there. So I ended up paying that, which wasn't bad. But so far, the X3 has been nothing but phenomenal. I haven't really tuned it because there's no need for it so far. I mean, eventually at some point I will get it, but the car, it's so user-friendly. It's so easy to use in your day-to-day life, and it's just quick when you want it to be quick. You just put it in sport mode and it just takes off. So overall, just to say, the car has been phenomenal. So you guys, by this point, I know this video has gone much longer than expected, but at this point you guys are probably wondering, so which is your favorite car? Which is the car that you love the most? I would say there's close to at first place. One will be the GTI. I love that car, very good car. Sorry, the dog is jumping up here. Very phenomenal, very quick, very tuner friendly. I love that aspect of it. Two, the second one close by is the X3 M40i that I just have. Again, tuner friendly. I haven't gotten to the point yet. but very, very easy to make a lot of power with it. However, I believe the X3 wins by just a little bit, and that will be because of practicality, space, and how nice it is on the inside. The GTI was the first generation, or not the first generation, but the Mark 7 was the first reiteration of it, and the infotainment system was very small. It just, even though it was the Autobahn edition, it just wasn't as nice as the X3. Dog wants to play. He really wants to play. Hey, no. Oh, he stole a socky. He likes to steal socks. But anyway, back to the video. So those are my two favorite cars. However, those are my one favorite car. That's two. However, an honorable mention would be the Volvo, the S40 T5 Volvo. That was, I would say, a really fun car to have around. The way that the 5-cylinder engine sounded and how comfortable it was to drive. The seats were phenomenal for that old car. And it was actually tuner friendly as well. But that's one of the cars that I kind of like wish I could have as a car, just to have it there as a memory and just like sit on the side and maybe drive it on the weekends and stuff like that. It would be really fun. It was a nice car. Well guys, I hope I didn't put you to sleep with this video. I know it was a very long video, but I had a lot to say. There's some interesting stories there as well that I had to put in. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys are visiting the channel, subscribe, and I'll see you guys later. Bye!